Right, so this is one of the first A Journey to podcast from AJOTO.
AJOTO on tour.
AJOTO on tour, yeah. Travelling the country and the world to find the most inspiring, influential people.
You could say that you are literally yomping all over the world.
I could say, yeah. I'm taking a journey too. I'm yomping.
Nice.
So yeah, the premise of the podcast is to sort of have conversations with those individuals around the world who are doing something unique, something interesting, and have taken a new spin on business and created business. So today we're in Sheffield and we're with Thom Barnett from Mamnick. So he set up Mamnick 5 years ago, and we're just going to try to basically find out a little bit more about his story so far, what inspired him to set up Mamnick, and his sort of views on how he operates a company, starting up, etc. So, yeah, do you introduce yourself, Thom, and tell us a little bit more about your sort of background and sort of where Mamnick began?
Yeah, I guess my background is kind of creative. I studied photography and I did a fine art degree at Hallam, and kind of dealt in vintage clothing and stuff to get me through university. And when I finished my degree, I was just in a position where I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. Kind of got a bit fed up running around trying to chase all the same products as everybody when it comes to dealing in vintage clothes and stuff. So I decided to just try and create a unique brand with the idea that you could only buy it direct from me, and I'd have full control over manufacturing and production and everything that I was doing. So I started Mamnick in 2012, just off back of designed 2 shirts and a couple of bits in Sheffield steel, and then just launched the brand via a website, just with that micro collection, and was lucky to have met a couple of Japanese gentlemen previous to starting Mamnick who agreed to take some of my first production. So that kind of started the ball rolling, and then as that built my confidence up from doing that first few productions, I just kind of pushed on, and I think now we're in year 5 and probably done maybe 115 products in the last 5 years, which is quite cool.
So it's a crazy lot of products, that.
Yeah. I mean, I am, when we've done a work jacket, and I'm saying, I'm not just saying that if we've done it in 2 different fabrics, I'm counting both those fabrics, if that makes sense. So it's probably more like 55, 60.
And that's 115 different variants, not just 115 things you've made.
Exactly, yeah. I've done 4 variants of the chip fork.
So I guess in some ways we're in Sheffield today, and it's romantically raining outside. So on the podcast you'll probably hear nice background noise of some rain splattering around.
Might have put you to sleep, that, actually.
But so what's it like growing up in Sheffield? Was there anything like this around when you set up, and has that been a inspiration for you?
Well, actually, I was born in Rotherham, which is 10 miles up road. I always liked following brands, and I always liked clothing. I think that's just kind of part and parcel of growing up in working class kind of communities. We all just used to follow brands, and I remember buying knockoff D&G jumpers and wearing it for you have non-uniform day at school and thinking you were at B's Knees with fake D&G jumper. So yeah, I've always been interested in product and brands, and I've always been interested in fine art, and all those things kind of came together after going to university. Kind of rolled everything out into starting a brand, and took bits of experience that I'd picked up along the way, and I think they all kind of rolled together to make kind of what Mamnick is today.
So I guess when you started out, you didn't jump straight into starting Mamnick. You've worked previously before that. Have any of those experiences or places you worked in the past sort of formed who you want to be today, or has it just been a waiting in something you've always wanted to do, and you just wait for the right time to go?
Yeah, I've worked all sorts of different jobs. I started out when I got my national insurance card through it. Straight to Meadowhall, working selling cookies, and then I worked in
world's best cookie salesman.
Yeah. Worked in Sunglass Hut selling sunglasses and watches. I've worked in Morrison's stacking shelves. I don't suppose it were until I started working around vintage clothing that I really started fully understanding how buying and selling kind of worked. But all those things obviously play one side of like the more pragmatic element of running a business, but then there's, you know, the creative side and the design side. Maybe I got through, I know I did design tech at Wickersley at A level, and a guy called Pat Buttrell were probably the first guy who ever really identified that I had an interest in product, and he put me on to people like Philip Stark and stuff like that. I mean, before that, no other teacher had really, I'd a bit of a class clown, and no one had ever really
taken any interest in you.
Yeah, no one had really put me on
the unloved child at school.
Yeah, so he played a big part. I mean, I don't know whether it was just that time in my life where I just started knuckling down, but you know, he put me on to people like David Carson, an influential graphic designer. I were also making music and started messing about with electronic music at that time. So like when I weren't at school or at uni, I were always doing something creative. You know, some of it with a product in mind, whether it be like, oh, I just want to make like a mad like noise tape and, you know, make a cover for it and try and sell it, or I were always trying to, you know, express myself, but also I had some kind of vision as to a product. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it were just never enough, like that idea of like jamming. It was just like, oh, I don't want to jam. I want it to have like a purpose. So I suppose when I got to a point where I realised and I saw what Mamnick could be, I kind of just struck for it, and here we are.
I think that's interesting. I guess with Mamnick, what I've seen from an outsider's perspective is there's a deep philosophy attached to what you do. It's not just, I want to make some products and sell them. There seems to be a lot more to it. The idea that it does look like a creative outlet. Do you think that's fair? Or
yeah, I reckon it's fair, and it's a compliment. I take it as a compliment. It's nice to hear. I mean, I do think it's very considered. I think some products happen very quickly, and if I'm being honest, sometimes it don't feel like it's been considered. But if I were to, you know, I also have to give myself a pat on the back and be honest that, you know, even the products that happen very quickly, like it's only through the process that I've maybe been through in the past that's allowed that thing to happen so quickly, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I just went, oh, I'm going to do this today. In my first year that would have been impossible, but now I've got relationships with factories. Sometimes things can move really quickly, and obviously that helps. And I don't know if that answered your question.
I guess in some ways, I think it's that idea of you've got that sort of creative. There's more to it. It's not, you've not just gone in. You've wanted to work with the factories. You've got those incredible backstories, and you know, people do play a big role in everything you do, and also I guess the landscape and the environment around you. There is sort of that underlying idea of like an artistic, I guess approach to what you're. Well, it's like I guess in some ways you could view Mamnick as your art piece in that way. Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, there's two sides as well. If anyone who's listening is not familiar with Mamnick, I think there's like the old Peak District, celebration at Peak District and riding my bike, and there's obviously that's represented through some of the cycling products and the whole like yomping idea, but then also the Sheffield steel side of it all. You know, a bit of that is through my granddad worked in steel industry, and no one was really making any steel product in Sheffield and representing Sheffield in that manner. When I started the brand, there are a few brands now that have popped up, but when I started it were all about like using Sheffield steel in this kind of way, and had those two like narratives running side by side, and I think I've just about like managed to like have a bit of a synergy between those things, because early on it was almost like, oh, should I have this like steel brand which is all just about Sheffield steel, and should I just have like Mamnick as this other thing? Maybe there should be two different brands, but I just thought, I just want to like put it all together and just express myself like that, and I do think that ultimately it's paid off. You know, some steel, I'm sure there are people who cycle who might want to buy like a Yomp t-shirt or some cycling socks, you know, but then there's also customers who want to buy a hip flask for their dad, and you know, I'm sure there might be footy lads who want to buy a work jacket to wear to a match, or there's like all these kind of different elements that are kind of coming in, but I think it's all very like authentic to me, because you know, everything goes through me, and ultimately when I'm designing like a work jacket, I'm designing something that I'd wear maybe to football anyway, so it's all kind of. I
think that's why it's interesting, because there's but there seems to be a not nostalgic view of the Sheffield history and manufacturing. It seems to be you're basically combining the best elements of if you're making stuff in Sheffield with contemporary design, contemporary graphics, you know, your lifestyle, and it's like you're showcasing a different way of doing things. I mean, do you find a work-life balance and bringing that into your work is something which you're trying to sort of showcase to people?
I guess it definitely comes through because I've just tried to be as honest as possible with everything. I've not really tried to like make this sheen. It's like, what, you know, I do small runs of stuff and I don't do any wholesale because that frees my time up to still get out on bike. And then when I get out on bike, that's when I have most of my ideas. So it all just kind of links in together. But yeah, I mean, the work-life balance, I'm sure I'm at a position now, I presume, where if I wanted to just get up and just smash Mamnick and just try and get it into loads of shops and, you know, be picking phone up all day, then I could probably do that. I've got enough like stock and enough ideas to do that. Whether people will take it or not is maybe different, but to me it's still very much about when can I find a few hours a day to kind of get out on bike. So, you know, that kind of keeps you sane. It's all about finding that. It sounds a bit like Buddhist, doesn't it? Like yin and yang kind of compromise, but ultimately I like that trait. Like, I don't think you could get one without other. If I were just riding my bike all the time, ultimately, you know, I'd run out of finances and I'd have to go and get a job. So it's just,
it's not realistic at the same time.
No, and I have, you know, I do feel I'm sometimes a bit reluctant to say, oh, I've been lucky, because, you know, I do believe that you make your own luck, and I wouldn't want to undermine the hard work that not just I've put into the brand, but a lot of manufacturers, you know, like people like Cynthia, who makes a lot of his garments, and Dave, you know, they've shown like a trust in me, and it almost feels like a bit of an insult to just go, oh, I've been lucky. It's like, no, not really. Without these people actually having a bit of belief in my vision and kind of helping me out with it, then I wouldn't be here where I am. So
I think that's what interesting, like the idea of I think it's something similar to what I'm trying to do in my own work as well at AJOTO, but the building those relationships up and how important those relationships are.
Yeah.
You know, especially around here, you've got a lot of manufacturing, and even the people you work with, it seems to be a lot of trust in people. I mean, do you find that do you feel like it's like an old way of doing business, or do you think that's something which you're seeing more prevalent today?
I'm not sure if it's an old way, because obviously I've only been doing it 5 years, so it seems like maybe this has always been the way, but obviously with rise of internet, it's easier to kind of reach out to people in regards to finding an audience. And maybe I've not really worked with any foreign factories or factories abroad. I've worked with people that are close because they seem to be the people that can do what I want to do. It's important that obviously it's steel stuff is made from Sheffield steel and made in Sheffield, otherwise, you know, I'd be lying. But I think that's where a stroke of luck has come in, where I've like looked to try and do something. I've had an initial idea, and then I've found that the best people to do it are people who just live down road from me, or for instance like Singletons, who do all our buttons. They're just like in Hackenthorpe, but you know, they're making buttons for Burberry and loads of massive companies, but yeah, it's just a cycle ride away from me. So that is the, like, it's not like I'm having to go all the way to Birmingham to pick my buttons up, or you know what I mean. It's all the things just kind of fell into place. Every time I took a step forward, something else just like opened up, and it was like, oh, like that's weird that that's just there. So before you know it, there's like, I'm designing a product and having it made, and there's almost like no air miles in it. I'm like riding to factory to pick up steel stuff, riding and picking up buttons, riding it to a factory in South Yorkshire to have shirts made, and before you know it, all these places are in like a 20-mile radius. So there's a nice story there, but it's not like it's just fallen like that. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's what I mean about that idea of authentic. It's an interesting concept. I think it's overused, but for you, like, the bike is an authentic element in what you do. It fits. It's not like you're going, okay, I also cycle at the weekend because that's on trend. He's going to actually do this as part of my day-to-day life. I mean, do you find in some ways cycling it's not just the idea of escapism, there's more to it? Is there there's a lot of people just go, I'm going to work in the week and then escape on my bike. Is it for you more integrated in your day-to-day life? It's
integrated for a minute because I've got time to do it. I mean, it might get to a point where Mamnick demands that much from me that I do end up becoming like, you know, working, doing Mamnick stuff Monday, Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday I'm out on my bike. But at the minute, you know, I manage to just like spread my time equally. But it sounds daft. I just use Met Office app, and it's like, when's it going to rain this week? Oh, it's going to rain Thursday, Friday, right? I'll get out on bike on the days that aren't Thursday, Friday, and I'll do all jobs that need doing, like when it's raining. Like, you know, today, if you just said, let's do this podcast, and it's not been raining, I'd be like, no, I'm on my bike.
That's interesting. I think sometimes from an outsider's perspective, you feel like a lot of these people who start companies, I mean, that's what I get as well. Like, there's some idea of a ritual you've got to go through. You've got to wake up at 5 a.m. And I think we talked about it last time. you got to live on 2 hours sleep a night and have this overarching unhumane focus on something. How do you feel that your sort of work and your process is, like, in terms of day to day? Do you have a set number of tasks to do, or is it completely organic and see how it goes, even with your riding as well?
I mean, some of it can be organic depending on, you know, you never know what's going. You know, you might get a phone call at 12 o'clock from a factory and they need you to go and just like overlook a shirt collar or something. But ultimately, it sounds daft. Touching back on what you were saying before, like running everything by a diary that's just got, you know, I've got a diary with a pen. It's not on my phone. It's like every morning I wake up and I go, right, this is what's happening today, or these are responsibilities that I've got to get done. And then once they're out of the way, then, you know, I'm looking to get out on bike. But sometimes it's like you have a list of jobs to do, and every time you tick one of those jobs off, it creates 2 more jobs. So everything just kind of rolls over from week to week. But you have to be I have to be very disciplined regarding that. I mean, it sounds like you've got like life O'Reilly when you're out on bike all the time, but I think it's it's made me very organised as a person, which I think if I wasn't very organised, it could be quite a chaotic like shambles. But I think because of my organisational skills, things seem to just run quite smoothly.
I think that's what's interesting as well. Like, I mean, even before I met you, I mean, just for everyone out there as well, I found Mamnick online, so I initially thought you'd been around for a while, and I thought you're probably a company of like 5 or 6 people, and you got photographers in here, and you had a big budget. But the reality is, you're sort of one guy in a room with some mates with you. Not to be like to downplay it or be patronising, but it's quite inspiring to see that and actually get behind the scenes. I think the way you've used social media has opened that world up as well.
It's maybe a relatively new thing to our generation as well. That is maybe in past, a lot of the products that were coming out of factories would then just go straight into shops, and you'd have maybe somebody who were a salesman for that factory. Whereas nowadays, like, I'm kind of acting as a bit of a designer, and then I'm meeting people who can design things for me. And in some cases, like, I've not really done that much designing. Like, they've come, you know, like when I worked with Jamie at Bantam, you know, we kind of had a few email conversations. We've never met in real life, and then we ended up with a sample, and it was like, oh yeah, that was great.
So next year we're saying that I've never met Thom yet, face to face.
Yeah,
collaboration. It's quite interesting how you can work today.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, I do think that is maybe, there's a lot to be said for, you know, the market and how that rise in technology has helped kind of find people in the world. I mean, I was having a conversation with Dave before, and I've doing stuff in diamond coated carbon, when I said, oh, how come you've not done anything like this in the past? And he said, well, I did a knife which he showed me. It was really beautiful with diamond coated carbon blade. I said, oh, how come you never put these into manufacture? And he said, well, at the time it was too expensive, and there wasn't a market for anybody who wanted to buy like a 50 quid knife, whereas now, you know, there is. So it's strange, like it weren't like his only avenue just basically said, oh, we can't sell that, and that were it, shut down. Whereas like nowadays, market's bigger, you could probably manufacture something really expensive. There will be somebody out there that probably wants that if you're prepared to, you know, put your knackers online and see it through and make it.
Well, I guess that's the point as well, like the idea of your customers and even the people hopefully following you on your live stream. It's still working.
Yeah, I don't know if it is working. Shall I have a
yeah, just yet. But I think that's what is quite intriguing in terms of the. Did it end?
Yeah, it ended. Sorry.
It's all right.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going. But I think in some ways it's the internet's played a big role in your ability to do what you're doing now. And do you find that especially like your customers who would be following this if it was live?
If it was on.
If it was on. But then, you know, those customers, that community they're sort of interlined. You're not. You aren't reliant upon, like I say with Dave, like that local one person, that one shop. You've got a global community of people who love what you do, and you can sort of share that with them.
Or a potential, like global community.
That's true.
It doesn't necessarily. I mean, the community is there. It's like whether you can kind of tap into it.
Like I said, you've had to build up your.
Yeah. But I mean, there's the fact that there is no limitations on how big that kind of thing could get. I mean, I don't know if there are limitations in Instagram. If like you wanted to, if you could have like 7 million people tuning in, I'm not sure if that is something that could happen.
Well, you never know. But, it is live.
But potentially, I mean, it's there, isn't it? Like, it's all just there at your fingertips. You know, a free app. I mean, I'm sure it was free when I got it. Instagram, like,
still, yeah.
And now it's You know, I do so much like business and get that much interest through it. You know, there are times where you just think, oh God, is my life been a bit dictated by my phone? You know, it's always like just there, and it'd be nice to be able to just turn that off, but ultimately it's like impossible to. It's like, it's a free marketing tool. I've never ever paid for any advertising or anything. You know, I've been lucky that people have shown an interest in my brand, such as yourself, and you know, blogs have been in touch and they've done features, and I've spent time asking and answering questions, on via email. But other than that, you know, it's all just, it's a lot of that stuff's kind of come from nothing. Whereas I think, you know, back in day, the only way to kind of get a market would be by paying somebody, or like paying for an advert. So it's, I mean, that's like, you know, testament to market and how things have kind of gone.
Well, I think that's something that's quite true. This idea of an uncynical approach to what you do. You want to avoid the paid marketing or forcing down people's throats. I mean, I know I feel that way about what I do at AJOTO. I don't want to sort of try and sell it to somebody and try and buy their attention, but I want them to find us. And do you feel that's the same for you?
Well, I think there's a bit of a psychology as well, isn't there? Like when I'm on Twitter and something pops up, you're like, why am I seeing that? And it's like, oh, it's sponsored. It's like my head just goes, oh, it's sponsored, you know, it's paid for. But then some people, I'm probably in the minority that responds in that sense, you know what I mean? But, you know, advertising's a bit of a funny one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, like, it's just about putting it under people's noses, and there's a bit of a big psychology, isn't there, behind it all.
You could do a massive billboard, look.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it. You could do a billboard, but I still think the power's in the idea. Like, when we started doing stories, when they introduced that stories on there, I just thought, well, I want to do something that's like interesting and memorable, and not just I could like come in here, take product shots and just feed them through and just do that every day. And I just thought, you know, there's another platform here. Let's just take it as a completely different medium and say, what can we do with this that could be interesting, or, you know.
Do you think that's the key to your success, that idea of doing, like, you sort of, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but do you look at other people and go, oh, that's an interesting technique, I might try and use that? Or do you actually think, well, what is it that I don't like about what's happening at the moment? Or, you know, even with the products and the reason for starting Mamnick, there's nothing out there, so, you know, why not make it myself? That sort of attitude of just go out and do it myself, or, you know, do it my way.
Yeah, I mean, I have done a lot of stuff my way, and then sometimes what's happened is I've just gone away and done it without even thinking, and then when I look back, I go, oh, I must have been doing that because I'm already a bit frustrated with how things are going. Whereas there are some times where I look and I'm feeling frustrated, and then it's like, how can I kind of kick against that culture? So that whole idea, I mean, he's a bit of a like left-leaning, like socialist guy, one of my old lecturers, Dave Beach, and I didn't agree with most of the stuff that come out of his mouth, but I remember him once saying artist contest culture, and I always just thought, yeah, that sounds cool, that, if you are contesting culture. I mean, I didn't particularly think that he was, but it definitely crosses my mind, like, when it comes to doing stuff, it's like, I don't want to feed into that whole, oh, let's just go to this trade show and give them a load of money, and then I'll try and recoup that money by getting my stuff in loads of shops. I rejected all that stuff. So, you know, I'm always trying to kind of go against the grain, for better or for worse. Sometimes that can leave you feeling a bit vulnerable and upsetting people, but, you know, end of the day, it's just an experiment, isn't it, really?
Well, that's interesting. You're viewing it a bit like well, maybe you don't, but do you view your business a bit like an experiment in that sense, or like the idea to test out your ideas, test out your thoughts, and have at least an output that people can engage in?
I think some products are experimental in a way that you know, I know that it's not some products you do and you just go, this is a dead cert. For instance, you know, cycling socks. I knew that if I'd manufactured a nice pair of cycling socks, if I did it right, just my logo on back, they'd sell pretty well, and they have done. But then there are also other products where you're just like, oh, let's just try this, you know, like I'd mentioned to you previous, like doing them little rulers and stuff. I've not really sold many of them, but it's still, I'm looking at both them products side by side, and you're like, that one probably takes more risks, and it feels more exciting to be like, oh, I've done like a mad little ruler, that's cool. And yeah, the cycling socks is like great because people buy them and then they share the photos on Instagram, and I'm always just like, that buzzes me out, because you see people wearing your product and like loving it, especially, you know, in London. You know, I'm really thankful at how they've been received, and like loads of people are, you know, taking photos of the socks and like, oh, I'm out yomping, and it's like, you know, that's really cool. I can't deny how good that feels.
But do you think you have do you feel like you have like an anti-establishment angle to what you do? Is that driven from your upbringing, or do you think it's even like sort of northern mentality, or is it just something personally from you've?
Maybe I'm probably just a bit pig-headed and a bit stubborn, really, and I just don't like. I mean, idea of authority. I'm not saying that I'm anti-authority. I'm always like, I've got open ears. I just listen all the time, and I'm always just asking awkward questions. That's kind of one of my traits, and people know me for asking pretty awkward questions. But I think that that's kind of played a part in getting me to where I am. I mean, if you look as an overview of my brand, if you're on my website, I don't think it necessarily comes across very anti-establishment. It maybe just looks like a luxury brand that's celebrating steel and Peak District, which it is. But I think the way in which I've kind of gone about doing it, I think it could easily be adapted into, like, you know, say if somebody come and bought your company off you and they were just like, well, we've got all these patents, we've got all these designs, we've got all this product, right, let's get this in 30 shops in the world. It could be easy to do, but the way in which I've kind of got there, I think has been a bit of a kind of, I've rallied against all the usual ways that, like, bigger people, big brands do that.
I think that's what, even interesting from what you, I mean, for me personally, there's a big interest in how you've, the front door, say your shop door, if you talk about that, we know you said it last time, but with your website, you look at that, and you automatically think, oh, it's going to be, you know, brown leather wallets, made you know, maybe like bridal leather, and then some nice little bits of silver stuff. Well, actually, you go on there, it's the complete opposite. You've got, you know, you look at your photo portfolios of photo shoots from your clothing, and a lot of the clothing is loud. You've got the pink bobbles in your hats. Incredibly contemporary patterns. It sort of juxtaposes too, and I feel that's what for me has always been interesting, is there is a juxtaposition where you are and your attitude to business, or, you know, the location you're in and the products you're designing, the materials you're using and how you're utilising them. Yeah. Is that a conscious thing? Or?
Well, I'm always a firm believer that things can kind of find their own form. It's always good to try and, like, nudge things in a certain direction and like, you know, you're basically directing it, but a lot of stuff that I do, I think, is quite, when you put all my products together, it all makes sense when you see it. You know, like when we renovated this room, it was the first time I ever really saw all my products, like, on a rail and stacked up. And then suddenly you go, oh, that's what all this is about. But it kind of took 5 years, and it weren't really like in my head, this is where it's going to go. It were like, we'll do one product at a time, as beautiful as possible. And then I got to this place where I finally see it all come together and go, oh, right, yeah, this is like what my brand's about. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit kind of, it's a bit, I don't know how to, it's quite playful, and I'm not saying that it's not considered, because it definitely is.
Well, it synchronises in some way, yeah.
But yeah, I think it has, a lot of it's just found its own form, if that makes sense.
I mean, in terms of your customers as well, I know you, like, Japan has been an interesting side to what you've done. I mean, considering in the first 5 years, and I know you had that connection with Sam already, but to build that sort of trust up and have that whole world of Japan, that culture, adopting what you're about. Yeah. Do you feel that was an easy sort of?
Well, it felt easy at time. I mean, I didn't really take it for granted. It was just things. Again, it just found its own form. I had the brand, and Sam was, you know, I was selling like old vintage Berghaus bits and some British-made stuff to him. He had other clients that he'd come to England to see, but he always wanted to spend a bit of time with me. And then he was like asking, you know, what are you going to do? And I said, oh, well, I've got this brand. Like, I showed him like some designs, and he was like, oh, if you ever get that moving, then I'd be interested in doing something. So, as I said at the beginning, you know, he took a bit of the heat off of the first production that I did by agreeing to take half of the shirts that we did, which was quite cool. And then that was received really well, and I think it maybe just come at a time in Japan where, you know, they're quite mad for made in England. He already had a customer there who trusted what he was bringing from England already, so for him to introduce Mamnick to some of his customers, it felt like a bit of a no-brainer. And then as time went on, we started working together and designing bits together, which he kind of overlooked the production of in Japan. And then from there, you know, we got to a point where he just said, oh, why don't we just do like a Mamnick Tokyo store? Like, he closed his shop and we agreed and like went over there for the opening. And
does it feel quite surreal then? I mean, I guess
pretty surreal, yeah. I mean, it's a bit, it's crazy, you know, like you meet people like at dinner parties who you've never met, and it's like, what do you do? And you know, it's an hard one to answer, and it's like, oh, I'm a designer. Well, I've got a brand, and yeah, we got this shop in Japan, and it's a bit like, oh, Jesus, do you know? But it doesn't feel like
grandiose in any way.
No, not really. I mean, maybe that's just a character trait of mine, or whatever. But it's like you're in that really nice. I'm in a really nice position to have all that stuff, but it doesn't. It's kind of just all come through hard work and
Also, I think the
bit of
persistence,
perseverance. So none of it kind of feels like it's been. If you'd have told me that 5 years ago, it'd have been like, Jesus, like you're living in a dream world. That's completely out of grasp. But when you see how these things work out, you know, building that relationship with Sam and him basically coming to me saying, we'll do this, and me going, not sure if we could do that. And he's like, well, we can, because, you know, I can do it. Yeah, I can look after that stuff in Japan, and just like trusting him really and building that friendship up with him. You know, it's every time he comes over, we just have it's just a massive laugh. As soon as he leaves, it's just like, oh Jesus, like where's the Sam gone? You know, like for anybody who's seen my stories and that, he's just so up for like a laugh, and he's just such a like top bloke. His family are amazing. When we went to Japan, it was just it were ace. His daughter's a class, and he's just a top bloke.
I think that's just a fascinating little connection you've made. But you say, I think some people you can go, oh, there's luck involved, but really I think the fact that you've had to make that opportunity, which is interesting. I think from an outsider's perspective, you might think, oh, you know, this is Mamnick, they got a load of money, they've opened up a store in Tokyo, but really you've built this up from scratch, which is quite rare. I mean, I'm finding that more and more, that there's very few businesses out there who start from near enough zero and build something up.
I think some of it as well is like been in right place at right time. I mean, I've met people and I've worked with people who are, you know, they run factories, they've been involved when manufacturing were massive in England, so they've made loads of money, they got massive houses and a few cars and stuff. And whenever we've spoke about that kind of thing, like, oh, how do you get that break? How do you get to that point where it's like really booming for you? And it's just like, you know, you can work as hard as you want, but there is, he's like, I remember talking to my mate George, and he said, summer it's just down to luck. You just have to be at right place at right time. So, you know, you could be just on a train chatting to somebody about. I remember getting a train back from London, and I was just talking to my pal, and little did we know, this guy sat next to him was like a business advisor. He dealt with investment and stuff like that. So we're having this conversation, and then my mate got off at train in like Leicester, and then this bloke's just like, oh, so what's your company? I've just been listening to your conversation, and I was explaining it to him, and he was just like, oh, I just deal in investment. It got to a point where he just said, I don't think you need investment, just keep doing what you're doing. But like, say I were looking for investment and you're having that conversation, that conversation that he listened in on could have then opened a door, if that makes sense.
Well, do you think that's like, because you're quite open, I guess, as a person as well, and that, you know, there's a humbleness to you, and not rather than kissing your ass here a little bit.
That's but fine. Kiss away.
No, but in terms of, I guess, it's approachable. You know, you're quite happy to sort of talk about what you do. And do you think that's a real key, maybe an underappreciated element about making a success of what you're doing, is by just talking about what you do, by being open, by inviting people into your world a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably got its ups and its downs, isn't it? As I've said before, there are trade-offs. I'm sure there are times where I've maybe said a little bit too much, and then somebody's like took an idea that's come out of my mouth and ran with it, which I've had that a few times, and then you just kind of feel a bit like, oh, I feel like you've took mick out of my good nature, if that makes sense. But then I reckon most people definitely respond quite warmly to open people. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you're interested and you like a conversation. I mean, I'm verging on being a bit of a gobshite at times, but
I'd never say such things.
I reckon most people. I think it definitely has played a more positive role than it has a negative role.
Well, I think it's interesting, even from the idea with, you know, you talked about like Sam and how you built the trust up there, and he was in some ways maybe an influential or driving force behind you going at it and Mamnick. I mean, how long ago before you started Mamnick did that relationship begin? Was he somebody who
maybe 2 years? But I mean, the one thing that's probably come as a surprise to some of your listeners or anybody who's watching is when I met Sam, he didn't speak any English, and even now, I mean, I tip my hat to him massively for how much he's brought his son on, but like, some people are just so like, how have you done all this? Because his English is so broken and difficult. It's like we've almost got this like language between us that we only speak to one another in.
Like symbiotic relationship.
It sounds pretty weird, but it's like, you know, my girlfriend made some dinner for us, and she had some friends around, and we're all just like sat there, and people are trying to act like, oh, so what do you do in Japan or salmon? You know, it's like he's not really understanding it, and then me and him are just like sat there like giggling and laughing amongst ourselves, and they're like, oh, I can't understand how you've ended up like growing this business together when really all you do is just look at each other and laugh. Do you know what I mean?
But has it been key, I guess, into you doing what you're doing?
I guess so, because it's given that freedom, especially. I mean, whenever I've done stuff in past, whether it be in bands or worked collaboratively, I often wonder if I'm a bit too... I like have a bit of a vision in stuff, and I like drive for that. And so like the compromise element can sometimes, it can like stutter projects, whereas...
Is it forcing a compromise on other people, sorry?
Yeah, sometimes forcing a compromise, or just that conflict of visions. Like somebody that might see something going a different way, and so it can just, you know, you end up spending time trying to work out that conflict or that stuttering to the project, rather than actually the project just running itself. And I think one of the good things that's happened with Mamnick, and especially Mamnick in Tokyo, is neither of us have really kind of... You know, when Sam's like, we just had a refurb over there, and I just like said, oh yeah, you just, you know, do what you want with it. I just sent him a few images that I'd seen on Pinterest or something, like, I think this is cool. But do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm there like phoning him up going, oh, you've put wrong flooring down. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, and exactly the same here. We have discussions about sizing charts and stuff just to make sure his customers are happy with like the production that comes out of England, because you know, difference in sizes and stuff. But other than that, everything just kind of runs quite smoothly without any of that conflict. And I often think, oh, maybe it's because our like language communication is kind of so broken up that, you know, if you're trying to just like discuss this tiny little detail, it's just like, oh, I'm just going to do it. I don't really, you know.
So you have to give the benefit of the doubt, and it's always...
Yeah, exactly, and it always works out fine. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes you can be pleasantly surprised if we've had to change a design, or if he's had to make a decision in Japan to change a design. When product actually arrives here, I'm usually like, oh yeah, that looks class. You know, like it's that surprise element of it, of getting the product back, is sometimes like what you end up like living for a little bit. Even though it's like your product and you've designed it, you're always a bit like, oh, it comes to you and you're like, oh, sick. Like I didn't realise it were going to work in that way. Do you know what I mean? You might have had to say working with your pens, but you can kind of get a bit... You get a bit sweaty and a bit like, oh God, product's coming back tomorrow, is everything going to be all right? And then you get it and you just like go, oh yeah, it's sick. And then you're like on a high.
I think that's true. I mean, I guess I have the same... the difficulty I have, maybe slightly different, because obviously it's not like necessarily the business partner side, but you know, definitely when you're handing over that trust to somebody to make something, and it comes back and they've just gone, oh, you know, John in the programmer, he's been in control of it, and he's the best, and he picks out, he's really proud of what he's creating. You look at it, you think, I never imagined it being this good.
Yeah.
And he's really taken a bit of love and care. I think that's all I'm looking for in terms of the people I work with.
Yeah, to get 100%.
Yeah, I think that we were talking about that earlier today. Just, you know, obviously you're working on your own here, but you've got that relationship, even though it's maybe, I don't know how that you're set up in terms of business relationship, but with Sam in Tokyo, which is quite far away, but has that been a struggle for you? I mean, obviously you found it with the manufacturers to trust them to make the things that you want. When bringing other people into Mamnick at some point, is that something you're maybe a bit more cautious over? Or
Well, it's just that time's not come yet, and it kind of linked back to that question that you were talking about, work-life balance. I mean, I'm grateful for all customers that I've got already, but there is definitely something to be said for, if the demand grew for my brand, then I probably wouldn't have as much time to ride bike. But what I think what a lot of people don't get is, you know, if I get up early and just like say I've got 4 things to post in a day, if I get up and do all them things, and then my day can be finished by 12 o'clock, and it's like that could get a bit sticky if suddenly everybody wanted like more product. But at minute I've got that work-life balance, not because or any other reason that the demand for my brand isn't as great as like how much hours there are in a day, if that makes sense. So I'm making like a living. I could be making far more money, but at the minute it's like there are only X amount of customers that are like buying it, if I'm being honest, you know what I mean? Which I'm grateful for it. I still make a living, but it could get to a point where it's like every day it's like I'm spending 4 hours packing, and then I'm having to go to a factory, and before, you know, at that point then I might think, right, I value my time and I need somebody to come and do this. But at minute, like, I can just do it all, which I think a lot of people find very difficult to get their head around.
I think maybe if you, I mean, I have the same thing really. I think people are always surprised when you go, yeah, well, if I'm working on this bit of packaging, I'm designing it, or if I've got to do some edits to the website, it's what we're doing back in the studio, taking some pictures even. It's similar to you, and I think that's what's been quite interesting is he's sort of a polymath. But do you think that's important if you want to do what you're doing to be...
If you want to control everything, definitely. I mean, I've seen people start businesses where they've got a couple of sewing machines and they're making everything in back, and then they're bringing it out at front of shop, and straight away I'm just like thinking pragmatically, like, are you ever going to make any money? You just end up becoming a slave to yourself, unless you absolutely love making bespoke one-off bits. But I mean, if you're just talking about making a t-shirt or something, I just think, go to a factory and get 100 t-shirts made, and then that time that you've saved, like, you could spend that doing a bespoke, like, jacket or a dress or something. But I think one of the luxuries, as I mentioned earlier, was, working with factories means that you can spend time designing at night, and then you have that conversation with factory, things go into production, and then while your stuff's getting made, you're doing something else. So you get on a bit of a roll with that, and before you know it, you can be doing like 2 products a month, and everything can just keep rolling out like that.
Because I think that's just quite nice. I mean, we talked about it last time quite briefly, but there's this idea going around that making stuff in the UK is super expensive, and that means your products have to be expensive. But I think the approach that you've made is saying you can't do it traditionally, maybe of the wholesale model and putting your big margins on and trying to make a lot of money doing that way. But if you go direct and approach business differently, there's a wealth of people out here, especially in Sheffield. I don't know if any of your customers have come to Sheffield before or had the opportunity to look around. It's amazing. It's a hotbed for what on one street, and there's just recently went to the guy who's welding frames up, and you've got got the steel manufacturing. I think, has that been an inspiration and a realization for you to say, look, I can make stuff here and I can do something a bit different, but I have to.
Yeah, it has. But I mean, ultimately, I think a lot of it just comes down to price. And I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who's manufacturing small runs of stuff in Japan and bringing it back to England and selling at the price that I'm selling at. I mean, ultimately, if you went to some other big retailers because they want their, cut at their wholesale margin, like some of the them Western jackets that we did we had that tweed made, shipped to Japan, made 20 in each style and brought maybe 8 back here in each style, and to retail that at 225, I mean, really it should be, you could argue that it could be 525 if it were in oi polloi or whatever, but I just try and keep it true to myself, and I'm happy with those prices. But I do sometimes question whether there is still a massive element of smoke and mirrors to most customers, because they maybe just go, oh, I'll buy it from there because it's got your oi polloi seal of approval and you don't mind spending that much. And a lot of time you work in a sale culture, don't you, where they have massive prices, so when they can shift it in sale and you pay 250 but it's down from 400, you think you're getting a massive deal, but really, it might have only cost them 40 quid to make and they bought it at 80. So I don't bother with any of the kind of sale culture stuff. I'm happy to kind of cut odd deal to loyal customers, but it's a completely a bit of in my eyes, a bit of a fresh approach to retail, because you own everything, and so you're not under any obligation. I own all product now, so I can basically set my own prices and just be I'm happy with those prices.
Yeah, I think that's again because we know the idea of doing what you're doing is non-seasonal. I know you talked about fashion, the idea of terminologies. But getting beyond that, really, it's the idea that you've approached this and you're not forced to do a trade show. And it's interesting, maybe for some of, especially my listeners and the guys who are your customers as well and followers, that the effort you go to make your products and doing it where, look, your jacket there is going to cost 200 quid now. But it's going to be £200 2 years later. You don't want to undercut, the people who are actually coming out there and essentially taking the risk on you.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think there probably is a level of insult if you've maybe bought a jacket at full price off a website and then 6 months later it's down at sale. I mean, most customers probably just get on with it. Do you know what I mean? Just oh, that's just how it works. But I think ultimately that's why we've ended up in this culture, especially regarding clothing retail, is most people wait for sales now, which basically it just doesn't help smaller businesses, because before you know it, you can't really compete. So.
Well, but do you think the idea of a sale culture gives the impression that everything's overpriced?
Well, I mean, I have to sometimes refrain to comment like that on Twitter, but it's just if you're offering it at 50%, were it ever worth 100%? Do you know, if I don't really, we spoke, like I said before, about fashion and product. I mean, to me, fashion is something it's just kind of a bit of a money driver, and it's here today, gone tomorrow, and everything just has to keep a trend and a conveyor belt. Whereas, I try and look at Mamnick as their products really. If I have 10 knives made, like there's 10 of them, and if it takes 2 years to sell 10 knives, then so be it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really. I could probably make a smaller margin and higher numbers and just try and like spin it over quicker, but it just don't really interest me. And I think it's, the products have like a value to them, and like I think that should be respected.
I think that's it, like the idea of the value proposition is something I battle with. I know, trying to explain to people my value proposition is not a price point, it's a quality point. And like you're saying, the quality of experience. I mean, even with your biking, I think that's just bringing it into that for a second. The approach to the idea of yomping is massively interesting to me personally, about just taking it's given a terminology for the idea of riding or getting out there, whether you're riding a bike or walking up a hill. You're not trying to be the fastest and be the most technically advanced. You're trying to get to the essence of what it's about, like just getting out there and seeing.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And
again, that's like a bit, as I said to you before, about that kind of kicking against the grain. It's not something that is intentional as such. It's not like, everybody's into racing bikes and they're just trying to get stronger. It's just, I've always just been about kind of pacing myself on long rides, taking things one thing at a time. Like YOMP is it an acronym or a synonym for your own marching pace? So to me, it's like just doing things at your own pace. So like you said, whether it's walking, riding bike, or whether it's just I'm going to design a product and I might design it like off at space for a month rather than off at space for an afternoon. Do you know what I mean? It's just all about kind of just taking things in your stride. And
I think that's what I like, but it's there's an evolutionary process to it. It's not like I think we talked must the first time I met you about this idea of an overarching strategy, and I think you mentioned, well, there isn't really one to what I'm doing. I've not got this master plan that I'm trying to play out. It's more to respond to how I'm learning as I grow. That's still true now.
Oh, definitely, because it is a constantly evolving market, I reckon. I mean, ultimately, you're still making product and selling it to a customer, but the way in which it hits that customer, there's all sorts of new kind of obstacles and stuff kind of popping up along the way, and so it's nice to be able to kind of stay versatile, to be able to maneuver in that market and still to try and make yourself stand out. Did I answer what you were just?
I think so. Yeah.
what you were asking?
No, but I think in some ways, like you're not a 50-year-old bloke who's worked all his life and then decided to say, I hated being a lawyer. I want to go and start my thing and do my creative outlet. It's like you're coming to this quite young, and do you think this is like, or do you find maybe on that point there, being young, there's a lot of other people out there the same age? I know Ian, like Campbell Cole and guys from Bamson Frameworks, just trying to make their own way. Do you find there's only a small community of people quite young doing this in the UK at the moment?
I've just been lucky to have those people reach out to me. I'm sure it depends, doesn't it? I'm sure there are loads of businesses out there that you just haven't managed to kind of stumble across. Like I was saying before, like when I were just flicking through Instagram and I saw those compasses, I thought, oh wow, that's an idea. How come I've not seen this before? But their business might be 3 times the size of mine, but yeah, I'm like a bit late to the party. And I think some people maybe come to Mamnick and go, oh God, he's been doing this 5 years and he's got all this product. Like, I'm a bit late to that party. So I think a lot of it has kind of been dictated through like the habits of social media and the rise in that kind of thing. I've not really I know plenty of people and that in Sheffield who work for themselves, but it's difficult, isn't it? Like, there isn't really that, I don't really know that many other people, or if anybody, who's doing something so similar to me, which is one of the reasons why I end up spending time chatting to yourself and Ian. There's always like somebody in a different city that's doing something similar who understands where you're coming from, but I don't think there are that many people, if anybody, in Sheffield who I talk to who understand like the old ins and outs of not just designing the product and getting it manufactured, but like the more pragmatic sides, cash flow and understanding business. It's like you could probably talk to someone who understands cash flow and business, but they don't know about designing product. Do you know what I mean? So
I think that's maybe it's a struggle as well. It's interesting just to, I wonder if out there in the community, and I get every now and again people contacting us to sort of to talk about that idea. Like, well, how did I do this and how did I do that? And there isn't. I always find it difficult to give an answer because there's never. It was never like a single path I picked. I'm going to do design today. There's always a million things happening. Is that similar for you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, there's always a multitude of responsibilities and things that are kind of going on. So yeah, it does change from day to day. And there are times where you accidentally neglect something, and then you realise, I'm a week behind on that now. I should be like moving forward. But what is there are loads of ideas in my head, and sometimes you have to kind of like prioritize different ones, because you realize, oh, if I put all them into manufacture at the same time and just like 2 of them don't sell as well, that could kind of just clog up your entire finances. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a skill in that's the hidden side of running the business, which no one will tip their hat to you for, because they never see it.
Yeah.
But like, you have to sometimes make decisions whether to like, oh, I'll put these into production because I know that they'll sell, and then they can pay for this thing that I'm a bit unsure about. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I guess it's not, the word hustle's not right, but you've sort of got to hustle your way through. You got to try get. There's a lot of guesswork. Which...
Yeah, it is, and I said, there's guesswork, but again, there's a load of like risks and chances. It's like everything's like a roll at dice. I remember like a Sam, he got like late on one night, and they were like, "Oh, should we go casino for one?" And they were just like, "Casino?" Like, yeah, what gambling place? Don't you do any gambling? And he just like went, "My life's a gamble." And I was just, my business is a gamble. That were it. And I just thought, you've absolutely nailed it. Like some people, like that's where you get that kind of rush for it. Because
I guess what it is, like, there's an adrenaline kick from just doing this every day. Like, it's not like the same as going out there and putting, £50,000 on black. I mean, I would never know what it feels like.
So I put fiver on red.
Fiver on red, exactly. And you're going, oh, I know that comes in. But there is a bit of that. I mean, I know for you, you've got a multitude of products as well. I mean, for me, it's maybe a different end of the scale. I've only got like essentially 2.
Yeah.
But it's, which makes you know the idea of,
hey, you've only done 2 products, man.
That's terrible. I guess coming on to this idea of Sheffield, which obviously we're in Sheffield today, and it's weird, they've never really come here as a city. It's only like 30 miles away from Manchester.
Yeah.
But to explore it, I mean, do you, there's a bit, especially in the UK, and maybe from an international perspective, do you feel that there's a very much a London-centric view of the UK, and how do you think you battle against that and getting yourself noticed?
I think there is, probably, from outskirts, like, for people who haven't been to England. I mean, how do I get myself noticed? Or just, like, naturally, when I first went for a bike ride in Peak, I remember, like, it was over yesterday, I went up, like, round back of Station Road at Bakewell, and you kind of go up this undulating road and you look to your right and you can just kind of see all into Valley, and it were a summer's day, and I just remember like looking through and just thinking, like, that looks amazing. How come not that many people are like out here doing this? And then at that point, I think when I started Mamnick, and it were like, oh, well, it's got to be about Peak District. So I started kind of putting Peaks kind of on map. I mean, me and my girlfriend have chatted about it, and you end up feeling like a bit of a, I'm like saying, oh, I know I'm not the first person to have ever gone in Peak District, but like when we were at uni, like no one were doing that, and then through Riser, like you said, people have been able to share their lives here. I've just seen through, like, as Mamnick's grown, more and more people, it's like they're just out walking and that in Peak, and maybe it's just they got to that age where that's what they do, but it kind of just felt like, oh, I've maybe helped put Peak District kind of on map a little bit. Well,
you definitely do it for me in a way, because it's something. I mean, I've lived in Manchester now for about 3.5 years, and I've rarely ventured in. But more and more, I'm like, well, why am I not going there? It's just an amazing sort of place. And like I say, it's inspiring to get out of the city, and the fact that when I was in London, because I know we talked about this, it'd be interesting to sort of hear your perspective of why you didn't sort of go down to London, and do the whole, like, I guess, young person London thing, which a lot of creative people do. But the advantage of being in Sheffield and Manchester on your doorstep to get out, like, obviously that's influenced what Mamnick's about, the fact that you've got that riding and you can just go out. Yeah, totally. And it probably it'd be very hard for you to move down there and go, based in London, I'm going up to Crystal Palace on the hills. But essentially, is there a reason behind why you probably didn't get down to London, or has it never been a drive? And also, there's never really been a drive for me to do it. I mean, I like it, but I've kind of always been a bit, it costs so much, doesn't it, to live there before you know it. Like, when you're selling all your kind of time for money to live, like, you go down there and you end up working full time for somebody else. What freedom does that allow you to kind of flex your kind of creative muscles? I always just thought I'll just really struggle. I mean, when we finished university and we started doing band, I was working part time just selling vintage clothing and doing a bit on eBay. But again, I've always had loads of free time, and that free time at that point were split between riding bike and playing drums and playing in band, and like I just ended up with quite a cool little lifestyle that was a bit stress free, I suppose.
And so, like, the idea of going to London and then just working 40 hours a week, 45 hours a week, before you even get a chance to go, oh, do you fancy, like, having a jam or, you know, going for a ride? I just thought, like, oh, I'm missing a trick, really. And, you know, sounds daft because it is a bit of a small town, Sheffield, but I can't think of anywhere in the UK that allows you to, you know, the rents are relatively cheap, like, you know, oh, even though I was whinging about how much council tax I'm paying last night, you know, it's, if you compare it to, I've got friends and colleagues and people I've been working with in London, and they tell me kind of what rent they're paying and everything, and I just think, God, I know it's all relative to, you know, how much money you can make down there, but it's just never really interested me, that.
I think it's interesting because even just from the idea of being able to take a chance, like you say, that feeling of risk, and to do this from, you know, quite a modest background as well.
Yeah.
There's a big amount of risk in there.
Everyone comes back from London as well, don't they?
That's
like,
I think, well,
they go down and they have a party for 10 years, and then they realise, oh, I'm
just talking about my lifestyle.
Crap. And then they're just like, oh, I want to start a family now, I best just move back home. And I just think, well, just save you some hassle and just stay at home anyway. Go to London for a weekend or something if you want to do that. But it's just never really bothered me, that. And they always come back with like a dodgy perspective on life, don't they?
Well, I think that, you know, the idea of maybe you being here and keeping yourself here and realising that, you know, that there's a cost involved. I mean, I think a lot of people underestimate that, the amount of time and also money it takes to start a company and do what you're doing. I mean, it always looks easy from the outside.
Yeah.
But do you believe that you could have even done this if you weren't like living around where you grew up?
Well, obviously I've set myself up obviously with Peak there, and all my products are named after different places in Peak, and it would, again, you know, tipping it back into that topic of authenticity, I would be a real phony if I like left here but was still just, you know, using stock photos that I've got on my phone at Peak District, but it's not real. I think maybe that's one of the things that like has proved to be quite popular and real with my audience. It's the fact that I'm here and I'm doing it, and you know, it's like I ride up a climb and take a photo and say, oh, I'm here, and somebody goes, oh, where's that? And you just show them on a map and it's like, oh, I'm going to go and ride that. I mean, like I said, that might be somebody who just never buys a product, but you've just inspired them to kind of go and ride the bike up that hill that they've just seen you on because it looks like it's cool tarmac or something. I mean, to me, there's a value, and maybe I don't think all brands have got a responsibility to like promote a lifestyle as such, but it seems very natural for me to do that, and it is something that I'm quite proud of, that it's running parallel to Mamnick. I mean, if eventually I could get to a point where, you know, those things would, when people think of Peak District, then they think of Mamnick, then that'd be like cool. It's
interesting, like, in a weird way, that your lifestyle you've got at the minute feels in some way alternative. I mean, do you feel that's quite a jarring thought in the sense that...
Well, I'm scared of it ending sometimes. Because I just think, like, well, you know, what would I do? Like, maybe I'm too stubborn to try and fit into somebody else's organisation. I mean, who knows? But it is weird that it's seen as alternative, because to me it feels really natural, and I must admit, I do feel as though, like, anyone can do it. Like, I went to supermarket on bike the other day and, like, filled my saddlebag up, and as I'm, like, riding back down Aberdale Road, like, looking, everyone's sat in traffic, so I just like clocking a few eyes, and everyone just looks right fed up. And like, my only thought, well, maybe it's just because I've been reading a bit too Thomas Sowell, but I'm just like, you're just trapping yourself. Like, you do live in the free world, and you can do whatever you want. Like, you don't have to be sat in this traffic. You know what I mean? You kind of you pay your money, you take your chances. I know that might sound a little bit narrow-minded, but from where I've come from as a working class lad, like, you know, my dad were a miner at Maltby. My mum used to work in a video shop. To kind of be where I've got to, it's just like I just used a bit of initiative, took a few chances, and here I am. It's like, I don't believe that I think anybody can do it. Do you know what I mean? I remember watching that Morgan Freeman saying the exact same thing on one of them like social justice warrior videos, just going, you know, there's a bus out of town every 15 minutes. If you want it, you can go and get it. And I do believe that, like, we do live in a world where now more than ever, if you want something, like, you can potentially go and get it. It's, as we've said before, you want to learn how to be a graphic designer, get yourself on YouTube. You get Illustrator, and you know, you can do all tutorials and be an Illustrator wizard by end of week. It's there for you if you want it. You just have to kind of get motivated.
No, that's exciting, isn't it? I think that's what was the exciting point for me, that realization that if you want to make something, I mean, maybe more time than ever. I know people complain to me, oh, it's tough today, and you don't know how it is, but if you take a step back and you realign your ambitions and your outlook, there is a huge amount of opportunity in the freedoms you get in the UK. I think that's something where when you do travel, and I've had the opportunity to travel and work around the world, I come back here and go, bloody hell, there's incredible freedom here. That you can take time out. The idea that you can just go online with a computer and start to sort of grow something in your own. That's quite interesting.
I think your feed's just finished, maybe.
Bloody hell. But maybe we should wrap it up now a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks very much for being part of my second time round, because we did try it first time, and I've learned that I need to be a better presenter.
I think you've done all right. Yeah, thanks for asking us to do it.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Cheers.